All right, I wanted to start off with this example in particular on the screen there. You have seen this image probably your whole lives, right? The Uncle Sam recruiting poster. He's meant to be pointing at us, right? So you're expecting the idea of his finger coming toward us in space, kind of pointing out of the picture directly toward the viewer. So I put up a screen grab I stole off of a website just of somebody pointing, just to kind of prove the point that this is not a made-up, invented art school thing. The concept we're working on this week is foreshortening. The term itself breaks down into two parts, fore and shorten. The fore, F-O-R-E, references the foreground, what is closer to us. The shorten part is what happens to the length of the object that is coming towards you. The length of it overall shortens. So you know logically that his finger, both in the illustration and in the photograph, those index fingers are pretty long. But in the drawing, even in the photograph, they look very, very short. So what I normally do at the start of this project, and it's kind of fun, but it does take a little time, so we're going to just move on. I often will ask people to try to draw this themselves. Let me show you what I usually get. More often than not, you get a thumb, index finger, and then the other finger is kind of like so. Like it's pointing downhill. That in no way looks like it's coming toward me in space. If we were to look at this as if it were a cylinder, that doesn't look like it's coming toward me at all. It looks absolutely like it's on a bit of an angle, but it's pointing downward. So what we're trying to avoid is this downward facing effect. What really should be happening in here is something like this. The tip of the finger a little bigger than normal, the length of the finger much shorter than usual, as if it's a cylinder coming toward us in space, like you're looking down a tunnel. So this is the concept of foreshortening. What's in the foreground gets bigger, the length gets shorter. Pretty simple when you look at it in terms of a geometric example. But let's take a look back at the photograph again. And you can see how odd it is. If you were to actually measure his finger physically on the drawing, that forefinger that's pointing towards you, the index finger, is actually much, much shorter than even the length from his knuckle on his fingers that are curled inward from the knuckle to the next digit down. So the idea here is that it is something that you will visually see and you'll recognize, and if it's done right, you won't notice it as being a problem. But when you go to try to draw it yourselves, very often our brains will tell us, there's no way, you can't make the finger that short, you can't make the arm that short, it's a long thing. And so you end up with that weird facing downward effect. So you can see it in this example pretty clearly. If you imagine a cylinder in space, like if I asked you to draw a still life and I put some bottles or something on the table and put them at different angles, you could do that really easily. But because we're now thinking about the human body, it looks a little more challenging, or a little more confusing. So take a look at the positions there of those simplified drawings of fingers. They are really nothing more than contoured versions of the cylinders directly above them. So if you think of this project in terms of trying to create a simple geometric space first, then you could draw anything. Whether that arm or finger or thigh or whatever it is pointing directly towards you, as in the case on the left, or the image on the right where it's actually foreshortened kind of in reverse. It's getting smaller as it goes away from us. Exactly right, yeah. And if you really were to look at the length of his arm in the photograph, you can see how weird it is. Look how small his hand is compared to his ear, right? because it's so far away from us. And the length of that arm is really, really, really short. You can see it in young people, old people. It doesn't really matter anything about the model. You could have someone younger, someone older, someone fitter. So what I wanted to do was to try to make this as fun as possible. I've got a bunch of photos for you to pick through that are of other Cape Fear students posing in funny ways that you could transform into some other image. You could transform them into superheroes if you wanted to. There's not a lot of difference really between what we just saw and the way those images are drawn. Now, if you really start to measure it, if you look at the drawing of Superman at the top left, that fist at the very top of the image is much larger than his head or even than his torso. But it doesn't immediately read as wrong to you because you know you're meant to see him as if he is coming out of the paper, right, or out of the screen in this case, directly toward your eyes. You can certainly see that effect here. This is a student drawing that really takes a moment to put a geometric form in place. If you were drawing boxes again, you guys could do this all day long. What throws us off is, oh God, now it's a person, it's got more detail, there's muscles and bones and fingers, and oh no, what am I going to do? Try to simplify it in your head, make it a cylinder, or in this case, I don't know what we'll call that, rectangular solid, right? Something geometric in space. Give yourself kind of a framework to work with, and it becomes much, much easier to do this example. So I haven't printed these out, but I will, to add to what we have. These are photos of models posing in ways that could be used to make more dramatic subjects. This could easily be, I don't know, Spider-Woman climbing up a wall, right? If you think about it from a different angle, different point of view, you could change this into a character quite easily. How about that one? That's my personal favorite. She's in no danger, right? But doesn't she look like she's falling, right? She definitely can't, but it almost, can you imagine rendering this like she was falling into like a volcano or something dramatic like that, right? You could really hype this up and make it look even more perilous or dangerous. What is actually foreshortened, though, in her body in this pose? The foot, I would say, on the upper, what is, I guess, her left, but on the upper right-hand corner, I guess. But even more than the foot, something that is literally the longest bone in the body that looks really short. The femur, exactly, from hip to knee. Take a look at the leg near the bottom of the screen. Look at where her hip is and where her knee is. The knee almost completely overlaps it, right? So we know, because it's a photograph, it looks normal. It looks right to us. But logically, you know that that is one of the longest lengths on your entire body. So if you were to draw it with that knowledge and not looking at what your eyes actually see, you might actually mess that up. How about her arms? Which one above or below, which one seems more foreshortened? For sure, right? When you look at the legs, the leg that has the most foreshortening on the thigh really has no foreshortening at all from her knee to her ankle. How come? That part of her leg, in the way it's bent, is basically parallel to us, right? Or parallel to the camera. So all you really have to think about here is the types of issues we've been working on since we started with perspective and landscape, thinking about spatial relationships. Another thing that will maybe irritate you, but is surprisingly effective with this assignment, is to go back and think about negative space. Especially if you're having trouble with the angles of the arms and the legs, look at the space in between. Can you imagine drawing kind of a funky rectangle between her arm, her torso, and that thigh that's kicking up to the right? If you can imagine that shape without worrying about it being her, but you can get the negative shape right, it'll help you with the angles. So all of the things that we've done up to this point can really help. There's extreme foreshortening here, right? Look at how short her arm really is from her shoulder to her wrist. It's actually shorter than the thigh in this position, visually. So what you have to do to make the foreshortening really work is you kind of have to literally draw what you see. and almost turn off the part of your brain that is going to start screaming at you, hey, that arm can't be that short. Because visually it is an optical illusion, right? It is creating that illusion of depth and that illusion of space. Oops, wrong way. This one's pretty extreme, but you can really see it happening here, right? So the concept is not really all that hard. The execution is a little more challenging. So I'll print these out as well, but there are already a bunch of action poses over there on the printing press for you guys to pick through. Those are from just a couple of years ago. Students posed for each other trying to do kind of action poses. There's a couple of them where they used some of our long rulers as swords. So they've done some kind of fun poses in there as well. But let's take a look at what you could do with this project-wise. Get back in here for a second. So just to get us started, these are sort of your two options right here. You could either do it kind of old school, art school, and just try to render it exactly the way it really looks in reality and use all of your skills with realism. That's perfectly fine. So the bottom example, the dapping example, is perfectly fine. But the one above it might be more fun. What if you took the pose that you have and transform it into something else? It doesn't have to be a character that already exists, like the Hulk, but it could be. You could invent your own character. You could use the pose to inspire you to do a character that you already draw. I'm sure that those of you who like doing cartoon, anime, manga style things have your own OCs anyway. Now's a chance to have your OC do something in a more creative, spatial kind of way. So there are examples all throughout here, but I wanted to pull in some from former students just to give you a kind of inspiration. How fun are these? It could be kind of silly and cute if you want. You could go for a more Disney style, for a sweeter style, storybook style. That's perfectly fine. That one has always struck me as pretty hilarious. It works pretty well. So you can go for as much color, texture, etc. as you want. You can go crazy with costumes, highlights, shadows. Those are superhero examples. Maybe you want to go more traditional. This is a student who did hers using an app on her phone. It's entirely digital, but it actually works really quite well. That's charcoal. So is that pencil. So you could do it more traditional if you want to. That's completely up to you. All right. So that gives you kind of a good idea of what to shoot for. We have basically a full week on this. We'll start today. The Wednesday group will start on Wednesday. It's not due till next week, Wednesday. Of course, this week you're turning in your landscape projects. Okay? So we have only a handful of things after this. The landscape gets turned in this week, Wednesday. We're working on the foreshortening. That comes in next week. The, oh no, I misspoke, because next week, of course, is Thanksgiving week. So that pads out this project. It's going to give you even a little bit more time to work on it over that longer break. When we come back after Thanksgiving, we're going to be working on the final project, which is a transformation. We're going to take black and white head and shoulders portraits, photographs, and transform them using a method that will allow us to either stretch or shrink or alter the faces in a way to kind of make them a little more surrealistic. So that is going to be the last project. The project we're going to do with ink will qualify for the last two grades, Project 11 and Project 12, pen and ink and ink wash. We're going to combine those two together. So landscape, foreshortening, ink work, that's it. We've got 3 drawings to go and about that many weeks to do it if you don't count the week of Thanksgiving. So go ahead and take a look over there at the example source images to pull from. You can use whatever drawing materials you want. I would start in pencil, but we have plenty of color materials you can use as well.